Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, taking a look ahead to Week 6 in the Big Ten, and it doesn't get much bigger than what we've got on CBS, America's Most Watched Network, the network of stars. Of course, you can stream it on Paramount Plus, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be in the shoe, baby, as Iowa comes to town to battle with the Buckeyes. And as we continue to also look ahead, that October 12th clash with Oregon that we've been looking forward to all season, I can say confidently, this is the toughest test that the Buckeyes have faced in 2024. Tom, take this wherever you want, but as you're looking at this matchup, where will Iowa be able to test Ohio State the most, in your opinion?
Yeah, you say it's Ohio State's toughest test of the season so far. I don't know if that's more of a damning statement about their schedule to this point, or if you're just kind of pumping up Iowa. So I guess Both? It depends on your perspective, but maybe, but you are right. Like, this is the most difficult test that the Buckeyes have faced. And the question for me is, listen, Ohio State's incredible. Like, talent-wise, roster-wise, you look up and down that depth chart, and there is a very good player everywhere. The best player on the team might be the 18-year-old freshman wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, but they are good at every single spot, and that's what you've seen so far in every game they've played. So when it comes to trying to break down this matchup, I'm just trying to figure out, is there a path to victory for Iowa? Like, what is this game going to look like if the Hawkeyes are going to pull off the upset? And it's like, how do they stop this offense? Because they can go any single way that they want to beat you. They've been explosive on the ground. They've been explosive through the air. The offensive line has been better than I thought it would look. It's been at least encouraging, although this will be a bigger test for it than it's faced so far. So if you look at Iowa's overall defensive numbers, you won't be shocked to learn that they're very good, because this is Iowa, and Iowa's defense has typically been good year in and year out. The question is, what's the best offense they faced? I'll let you decide. Iowa State or Minnesota? Go ahead, pick one. It doesn't really make a difference. Neither of them are very good. So this is a completely different animal. And I look at the way Iowa plays. To this point, they have not done a good job of generating pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And when they have generated pressure, they've typically had to blitz to do it. So you get kind of caught in a situation where, do I want to blitz Ohio State? Because if I do, I'm leaving some very talented players in one-on-one coverage, and I'm not sure how long I can cover them. Plus, Will Howard, far more mobile than Kyle McCord was, so if I do pressure him, he can escape through the pocket and maybe go with his legs, pick up first downs or chunk yardage. So it's a very tricky situation to be in if I'm Iowa defensively. I do not envy them trying to solve this one, nor do I envy any defense trying to figure out how you're going to stop Ohio State. And then on the other side of the ball, Iowa's offense has been so reliant on Caleb Johnson. We've talked about him on the show, and I've written about it. He's been phenomenal. He's been one of the best running backs in the country statistically and performance-wise, even if he's not getting a ton of attention nationally. But what if Ohio State's good enough to take him away? Does Iowa have a counterpunch? We haven't really seen it. So this is going to be a kind of game where I expect Ohio State to win. I don't know how well Iowa can realistically expect to perform here, but there's always a chance, because Ohio State has been somewhat loose with the football. They've only lost one fumble, but they fumbled 5 times. And I don't know if you guys remember much, but Iowa's been pretty good at forcing turnovers in recent seasons. So maybe that's the way to go.
I think Tom has it nailed there. Iowa's offense is unquestionably better this year because it's not beating itself quite as much. But against Ohio State, you have to do more than just not beat yourself. You have to be able to actually create some explosive plays, which I would kind of go back to the Michigan game from 2 years ago when Ohio State played them. And they said, hey, we don't really have a lot of respect for your passing game, although J.J. McCarthy ended up being a first-round pick, and they had multiple picks at receiver, so maybe not the best game plan for that one. But Michigan was able to create explosives against an Ohio State defense that was loading the box like crazy. You know who else loaded the box like crazy this year against Iowa? Iowa State in the second half, because they had to, because Iowa was up, and Iowa State said, hey, if we're going to go down, we're going to go down with you continuing to throw the football effectively. And Iowa could not do it. And they easily shut down Caleb Johnson in the second half. He popped some explosives, but he was not able to rush the ball, to Tom's point, with any success. So if I'm Ohio State, I'm saying, let me see. I have Jim Knowles as my DC. That's what he likes to do, is play a lot of singles and some like low quarters on the outside. We're going to stack the box. We're going to see if any of these Iowa receivers are any good. And I mean, to be frank, I bet you what Ohio State sees from its second and third team in practice is better than what Iowa has starting at receiver on roster talent. So if you're one of the corners for Ohio State, you're probably like, all right, Wednesday's practice was tougher. Tuesday's practice was tougher. We got this. So I don't know. Like maybe Iowa could find some answers, but I'm not really like. Would any of the Iowa receivers be on scholarship at Ohio State? I doubt it.
You're probably not wrong. This is a matchup that clearly favors Ohio State. That's why they're a 3-touchdown favorite. But we're talking about, hey, how could this possibly work out for Iowa where they could make it a game? I think you've got to test them where they are challenged recently and where they have struggled, whether it was against Michigan and they lost, whether it was against Notre Dame and they won, and he calls out Lou Holtz. Last year's game against Rutgers too was on the road, and that game was tough and it was tight, and you just slowed down the game, tried to slow it down. And Shiano had a great game plan for him. It was really close, and then all of a sudden, a couple turnovers, big turn, and it's like, okay, flip the script, and Ohio State wins pretty easy. I think you've got to stay consistent with who you are, and this is where it gets interesting because you bring in Tim Lester to revamp the offense, and it has been better. And they have utilized more motions, and they are doing things, getting the ball out a little bit quicker. But isn't this the type of game where you kind of don't want to feature those types of things? Like, I think you might want to work in some play action pass early because I do think they're going to stack the box. You try to get Cade McNamara some easy throws to the tight end, maybe some misdirection stuff, maybe work the screen game. But it's not like you're going to spread them out and go 4 wide and say, okay, this is the game plan to beat them. So I think you do try to jam it right up there, jam it right at them. See if you can maybe break a couple big. I think they'll stay committed to Caleb Johnson, which I think is what you have to do. But the flip side, I think, is what gets interesting because this is one game where Will Howard, who had been pretty solid so far, this will be his biggest test. We mentioned Iowa and Phil Parker, one of the better defensive coordinators out there. Can they slow down this attack? And that's where you mentioned the receivers that Ohio State has and how many of Iowa's. Their mismatches all over the place on that side of the ball. So can they minimize the big plays and not get torched by Jeremiah Smith or Igbuka or whoever they want to go with? That's the question I have too.
All right, let's go. Is anybody going to call an upset? Just give me a nod. Yes, no. Okay, nobody's going to call an upset. All right. So here we go. Let's go around the horn on this one. Danny, who do you think is the best player on Ohio State's offense?
Oh, Jeremiah Smith has been awesome so far. He's probably the most athletically gifted, which is insane when you think about the backfield and you think about the athleticism they have across the board, and they have another first-round pick in Igbuka. I'll go Jeremiah Smith just from the physical presence that he brings and how he's so tough to bring down and match up against.
I'm going to go Seth McLaughlin, the center they got from Alabama. This guy's been Remember how he couldn't snap at Alabama, and there's been zero snapping issues so far at Ohio State, and people from various camps were like, oh, it's his fault, and then there was some fire back like, oh, maybe if you remember to like clap before giving the ready signal and whatnot, that would help, and there was some back and forth. But Ohio State has to be absolutely thrilled that they were able to buy low on Seth because he has played awesome for them. Now, here's the thing. They haven't really played anybody decent defensively. I mean, Western didn't really try in that game. They basically just took the paycheck and went home. Akron, if they did try, we couldn't tell because they're pretty awful. Marshall doesn't really run the same type of stuff that Iowa will run on defense. And Michigan State is just so early in their rebuild following Mel Tucker that they're really not capable of giving Ohio State serious problems. Like, I am curious, does Ohio State have to show anything in this game? Because so far, they have just been doing the bare minimum. Like, we're not running Will Howard. We're like very much. They're getting those cards real close to the vest in anticipation of that game at Oregon in a couple weeks. Can Iowa make them show a few more things? Like, do they actually have to try? That's what I'm watching for.
As far as best player on the team, is there really a wrong answer? Like, you go up and down the roster on that side of the ball, it's like everybody's really good. So, you know what? I'm just going to go with Trevion Henderson simply to shout out the pass blocking he showed against Michigan State. He picked up a couple blitzers. It's like, yeah, running backs, their job is to run the ball, get first downs, and score touchdowns. But the ones who can pass block truly help an offense out in the passing game. And I think Trevion Henderson's ability, he is probably the best pass blocking running back that they've had since Ezekiel Elliott, who was pretty dang good at it himself.
I mean, there are no wrong answers, Tom. You are correct. I love Bud calling out Seth McLaughlin. And honestly, Danny, I was wondering, I asked the question because I was like, I think Jeremiah Smith might be the answer. And that is bananas when we've got 9 other NFL draft picks in this offense. Crazy. And we'll see if Iowa can be able to really hold their feet to the fire, force them to get a little bit deeper into the playbook, and really make them sweat for the first time all season. Well, if you want any picks from this game, why don't you come on and join us Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, live at youtube.com/cover3. All of our best bets for the entire weekend, and I can promise at least one pick from this game. So come and check us out. Again, you can download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, but watch live Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time on youtube.com/cover3. Well, coming up on the other side, it is technically a rematch of last year's national championship game. But buddy, a lot has changed for both Michigan and Washington. Still, it's one of the biggest games in the Big Ten all weekend. We'll break it down next.